My name is Ann McCauley, and I work in the Office of Sustainability.
And my name is Ty Allushuski. I work in the Office of Admissions, and this will be my 4th semester teaching a section of EDHE.
This will be my 3rd teaching a section, but I took last fall off, so I feel like I'm a little more rusty than I would have been last year if I had kept with it. And you may not know this about Ty and myself, but we are the campus's leading experts on syllabi development.
Or so we've been told.
No, but we both agreed to be on this committee because we've taught it a couple of times, and so we've done our own syllabus work, and we agreed to dig a little bit and put some information together. So that's why we're here today. But we wanted to get started by since we have kind of a small group, if everybody would like to introduce themselves and tell us if this is your first time teaching EDHE 105 or 305, or if you've taught other courses, or how many times you've taught, and just so we kind of get a sense.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm Susan Tyler. I'm in the financial aid office, and I was a co-teacher for an EDHE 105 class 3.5 years ago, and I will be teaching a 305 class this fall.
Great.
I'm Jamie Nelms. I'm in sociology. This is my first semester teaching 105. I taught EDHE 101 in the spring, and then I teach social classes. So.
Okay.
Wynn Graham, I'm with University of Communications. This will be the first time I've ever taught pretty much anything short of coaching.
Nice.
Will Hamilton, I'm also in University of Communications. This will be my first time. We're co-teaching a 305 section.
Great. Okay. So y'all are teaching together?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be good.
How about up here?
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Parsons. I work in Honors College, and my section is limited to honor students, which I think will be exciting. And this will be my first time teaching.
McCauley Thompson. I'm a graduate assistant in the first year experience office, and this will be my 3rd time teaching EDHE 305.
Hi, I'm Shambhoda Mead. I'm with the Center for Inclusion and Cross-Cultural Engagement, and this will be my first time teaching 105 here. I've taught it at other similar versions at other campuses.
Great.
Okay.
I'm Jeremy Roberts, Nutrition and Hospitality Management. This fall will be my 5th time teaching 105. I've taught 101, and I teach multiple classes over in NHM.
I'm Elena Dotson. I'm in graduate school for school counseling. For this, I was teaching elementary school, so no, I'm really college students.
I'm Vanessa Cook. I work in outreach marketing, and this is my first time teaching.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Banahan. I work in student affairs. I'm a little embarrassed to say I've taught this class a little more than 25 years. Hoping for some new inspiration.
Thank you, Leslie.
I'm Rachel Durham in first year experience, and this is my 5th or 6th year teaching. I haven't done the math yet.
I'm Erin Rideout, admissions. This is my first, I'm actually co-teaching. I was voluntold, so I had to I taught English at Terry High School, and then came here, so this is my first year teaching the EDHE.
I'm Mariana Rangel, academic advisor at the Center for Student Success, and this is my 5th year teaching EDHE 105.
I'm Dewey Knight, not Johnny Depp. I think this will be 18.
Great.
All right. So we have a lot of veterans in the room, and some new people as well to teaching this course or any course. So maybe some of you should be on this committee next year. All right. So if you wouldn't mind, take just a minute or two, and think about and maybe write down on any kind of piece of paper a couple of things that you hope to get out of this workshop. What made you come, maybe, or if you have any specific questions or just general areas that you hope we cover, because Ty and I aren't going to we don't have an hour and a half worth of material to cover. We have some really distilled pieces of information, and then hopefully we have lots of time to talk about your issues or questions. So if you would just take a minute to think about that. All right, so I think just as a quick order of business, what we're going to do is we're basically going to talk about a syllabus, just some of the really basic requirements or components of a syllabus. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the EDHE 105 and 305 syllabus and some of the required components. Because sometimes if you just start with the model syllabus, it can get a little bit overwhelming and a little bit confusing as to if you want to make it your own, what can you take out and what can't you take out. So that's kind of what we're going to do next. But before we talk about a syllabus, we wanted to kind of have a discussion about why a syllabus is even important and who is it important to.
So why is a syllabus important?
You give your students a clear expectation and roadmap for what they'll be required to do, what's expected of them throughout the course. And so it's that agreement between the student and the instructor.
Yes. And so it's important to students. Who else is a syllabus important for?
Teachers.
Very much so. It's going to be your guiding light, right?
Who here has a job outside of teaching EDHE? Right. So I find that it is absolutely important to the students. They need it, but I need it more than anything. I need to be doing it right now. I mean, I haven't finished my syllabus yet, but I need to be doing it right now so that when the semester gets underway and we're all overwhelmed, the students are overwhelmed and you as an instructor are also overwhelmed, something has to be that, consistent piece, and a really, well prepared and laid out syllabus can really be that, that piece between the two of you that everyone knows what to expect. It's what you can fall back on and refer to when things just get really in the thick of it.
And we'll talk a little bit more toward the end about sequencing and actually planning out individual class periods and how that can help, again, to keep you on track as an instructor, but also, again, like Sean Boda said, to kind of give your students a roadmap of where the course is headed and what's upcoming for them.
So who else is this syllabus important to? It's important to instructors, it's important to students. Who else is it important to? It's important to the administration. It's important to the university. So it is required, every course that's taught at the university is required to have a syllabus, and you'll get a memo probably sent out sometime in the early fall from the provost's office reminding you of submitting your syllabus and having that syllabus. So it's one of the fundamental pieces that the university will put together for accreditation. So it's a fundamental component to any college course, and it's what keeps us legitimate, and so it's very important to the university and the administration as well. So because it's so important, I think one of the important pieces is thinking about how you introduce it to your students. You want to make sure that they understand the importance of the syllabus. So does anybody have any creative ways that they introduce their syllabus in the class?
On the first exam that I give, it's in two parts. And one part is an open syllabus test component where I actually have them answer some questions based on information that's in the syllabus. And surprisingly, there are a lot of folks that don't get the correct answer. That kind of elevates it to where they will consult it. And I started doing it about 2 years ago, and it worked very well. I stole the idea from somebody else. I don't remember who, but it works very well.
Who review? Oh, go ahead.
Excuse me, but on that syllabus submission, you'll get an email from me because I collect all those and give them to Dr. Epting. Because the provost does have to have a copy. It's a SACS requirement that there's a copy on file for every section.
Who introduces their syllabus on the first day of class? Those who have taught previously? A few? Okay. Why do you introduce it on the first day of class?
You're saying it just lays that expectation. I usually spend, my syllabus, my other classes are long, so I usually spend a really good chunk amount of time going over every specific detail, just so I kind of set that precedent. This is what I expect. You need to know it. If you have questions, you can come talk to me. Please refer to it. And throughout the semester, I always have a copy. I'm like, okay, what are we talking about today? Wait, did we change that? Did we do this? And I always hope that they they don't have a hard copy, they have the computer, they can pull it up on Blackboard, that's there for them, always have. So that's what I do.
So a good general overview on the first day to communicate those expectations. Who does not communicate or teach the syllabus on the first day? A few folks. Mariana, what is your thought in not doing it on the first day?
I guess the first day I just kind of go over the rule and do an icebreaker and get to know you. I don't know. And then we'll get to business the second. Usually the second day of class is when I do it. And I do it on the third.
I do it on the third. One of the big reasons is you got so much turnover in the those first two weeks when they're dropping and adding. I don't really get down. I try to. I don't want to have syllabus day, as Stephen's referring to, the first day of class. I want this class to be different. Talk about why it's different. So I don't do the syllabus till the third day.
Certainly it's a very personal decision, and there's no right or wrong answers, obviously, and that's kind of why we're talking about it in this way. Personally, my syllabus is usually very long, and it takes me a long time to go over the syllabus, and so I don't want to bombard them on the first day with all that information. We spend some time very casually talking, introducing ourselves, doing some icebreakers, things of that nature, and I will try, if at all possible, to hold mine till the second or third class meeting as well, and then dedicate a full class period to it. But again, personal preference, no real right or wrong way to do that.
One of the things that I do after the second week of class, before I tell the students that before you ask me a question about class requirements, you have to preface it by saying, I've read the syllabus, but I still don't understand. and for about a week, I have to kind of remind them, now did you read the syllabus? Okay, I haven't read the syllabus. But then after we kind of go through that exercise, then in the next week I find that they're much more kind of with it, and they've kind of realized it. I've also heard about people, when they introduce their syllabus, they get students to sign a piece of paper, acknowledging that like this is treating it like a contract, because in many ways it is a contract. It's not only a contract, you're not just laying out the terms that you expect them to follow, but also in other components, you're laying out the terms that you agree to abide by as well. So really it's a contract for both of you. But I've definitely heard of that method of introducing it as well.
And along those lines, you may want to include some language in your syllabus, kind of as a disclaimer that it can and likely will change during the semester. I have never taught a semester of EDHE where my syllabus has been the same on the first day as the last. So letting the students know that up front, again, provides transparency. But as Ann said, a lot of times it is looked at as a contract, and so it gives you that flexibility as well.
So we can turn now to talking more specifically about some of the components of the syllabus. And when we first started, looking into creating this workshop, one of the first things that we did was, started looking for different resources. And it turns out that even on this campus, there were a lot of resources that were already provided for in faculty and instructors on how to create a syllabus and best practices. So some of the information that we've done is just kind of compile that together for you all. So for a minute, we can put away the model syllabus, and what we're going to talk about right now is basically just kind of a sifted. I work in the Office of Sustainability. We produce compost. We also sift compost, so that's terminology is on my brain right now. But basically, we just lift out of the model syllabus the headings. And so we can just really get down to a bare bones outline of what a syllabus is. So if you want to look at that, components of a course syllabus. So basically you're going to cover course logistics, you're going to cover instructor information, course information, grading structure and components, as well as policies that are applicable, and then an outline of your topics or the sequencing of the readings and everything that you're going to cover. So in your course logistics, the name and the section of the course, the semester, and the year. And that will help you also from year to year keep up with which version of the syllabus that is. You want to list the class meeting times and the location. All this stuff is very just kind of basic information, but you definitely want to have it.
Important.
You'll be amazed about the questions that you might get. Then you want to cover the instructor information. So this is information about you, the basics, your name, how to reach you, your phone number, your email, or whatever reachable information that you want to give them. And then how you are accessible to them. So make it clear on this document if you want them to set up appointments, if you want to set office hours, what those office hours are, and then maybe even say drop by anytime during this office hour. So that really is up to you. Or maybe you have an open door policy. You know, if you're always in your office and you don't mind them to come by, you want them to feel comfortable coming by anytime. So that's some information you want to cover at the very beginning of your syllabus.
And some instructors will provide their cell phone number for students to be able to reach them in emergency or just to communicate in a more informal way. I've seen it put on the syllabus before. Sometimes they'll just give that out in class, but also something to think about in terms of contact information.
Then the next one you're covering course information. So this set of information is like the kind of the big picture. So we're going to talk about the course description. Now this information is standard among all, either the 105 section or whatever section it is. This information should come directly from the catalog, and so that's where that piece comes from. And then new to the model syllabus this year are the learning objectives. These are called, in the model syllabus, they're called student learning outcomes. And these are very important for you as an instructor, I think, more so than the students. I mean, that information, having that information for them is important, but it's great that these have been kind of distilled and given to us so that we can use them. But what you want to do then is take those objectives and link everything that you do back to them. Let that really be the driving piece as you move forward. So we have the core curriculum, but what the learning outcomes is by the end of the semester, through the activities, through the readings, the assessment that you produce, the students will be able to do these 9 things, or learn or perform in these ways, know these things. So be very mindful of that as you put together the rest of this. So this is the big picture part, and then let that kind of inform the more specific and detailed pieces. So the core curriculum also is going to be the same for all the classes as well. And then the course materials, that's up to you. We have our textbook, and we'll all use that. Some people might choose to use the A game, or maybe if you have another supplemental piece. So that you want to spell out all that information. So does anyone have any questions about this part? Because some of this is a little bit new this year.
One thing I'd add, all of your students will have been given a copy at orientation of the Education of a Lifetime. They don't have to purchase that, and the A game. So they have both of those books. They will need to purchase the Oldest Experience 5th edition, which is due to be delivered the 27th of this month. And I will in turn get those to all of you.
So that was a great development, I thought, this year, is adding in the learning outcomes, because that way we can all come up with our own different ways of introducing it and getting our students to this point, but it's nice that we're all we have this common, very spelled out set of objectives that we're trying to achieve. So the next component or section of the syllabus is going to be probably one of the most important sections to your students, which would be the grading structure, the components that would make up their grade in the system. So you're going to list in there what the requirements are of the course, how they're going to be graded, whatever components will make up their grade. So whatever system you come up with in terms of exams and papers, projects, that's going to be spelled out in the grading structure and the components. And the grading system and the procedure. So you all as instructors are able to choose whether you want to utilize the plus-minus system or not. But whatever you choose needs to be spelled out really clearly in the syllabus. So you'll come up with your own point system, or you can use the one in the model syllabus, but just make sure it's very clear, and they will hone into that immediately and start asking questions about how this affects their grade. If you need to be have your mind wrapped around that, because there are many different components that make up their grade in this class. All right. Now we have a section for course policies. The attendance policy, in terms of course policies, is the only real hard requirement for inclusion of the syllabus. And the attendance policy is really up to the instructor. You just have to spell it out in the syllabus. So you need to tell them how you're going to handle absences, how many absences you're going to comfortably tolerate. What is an excused absence if you have one, or how do they, communicate that to you, and how you'll communicate it to them. There's some great guidance that the university offers. There's a policy called Class Attendance Guidelines, so that could be a really helpful piece to you while you think about what you want your attendance policy to be. And I think on the back of this document, we have the policy numbers, so if you want to look at that later. Some of the really strongly recommended class policies to include would be class participation. So what you're going to require that they come to class, but then what does it look like when they show up, and then how are you going to interact with them? And then the academic integrity, conduct, and discipline. And again, there's some great guidance that the university offers in the policies, and if you want to look up that information. And then, of course, late homework and materials. Now, this is not something that when I first taught I had in my syllabus, and then I was completely overwhelmed when it happened, and I felt like every instance I really didn't know what to do. And of course, my heart went out to everybody, So it really benefits you, I think, to have that written in there. And of course, you can always use your discretion, but you're setting yourself up, I think, for more success if you just go ahead and spell it out to them what your policy will be for late materials. And the university has a disability access statement, and that's also on the model syllabus as well as on the back of this document. So you can just copy and paste, and that is, regarding what classroom accommodations that will be made for students that need them.
Mariana?
Is it okay if I share something?
Please do.
One thing that I've done for the past couple of years, I don't think I came up with this, I got it from someone else, and I can't remember who, but under class participation, I added a respect sentence, just saying, we will discuss, some sensitive topics, this is what's expected of you, you don't have to agree, but something with that, and I spent some time talking about it on the first, when we go over the syllabus. And then yesterday, I attended the LGBT training, and she talked about adding a diversity statement under policies, and the English department website had a really good one. So I haven't looked at that yet, but I'm thinking about adding that under the disability statement. So it's an idea for everybody.
That's a great idea. So the English department has a statement?
Yeah, they have a diversity statement on their website that everybody can look at and kind of model that or come up with their own.
All right.
Patrick, do you need us to repeat any of that for the recording? Sort of. So Mariana said that she adds a line for respect and a line for diversity in the syllabus, just to help students better understand that when some sensitive topics are being discussed, there is an expectation that's being communicated to the students about how to respond and how to act within the classroom.
All right. And so the next piece of the syllabus is where you'll cover an agenda or an outline of readings and the topics. And you can do this, you know, you can get very detail oriented with it and say class period by class period, or you can structure it a little more loosely and have it laid out by the week. But regardless, you'll want to get that information out there to the students as, you know, early as possible along with your syllabus, so that they kind of know what to expect in terms of from week to week what their workload will be. And of course, always plug in that this might change, and it's their responsibility to keep up with those changes so that they feel, you know, prepared for the fact that you probably will get off topic. I mean, something's going to happen. You might have an incident that you'll want to address in your class. Something will probably get you a little bit off, but if you build that in, that you want them to keep up with those changes and that they will occur. So that's it. That's basically, just in a nutshell, the basic components that you'll want to cover in your syllabus. And then Ty will cover a little bit more as a specific EDHE course what you'll want to cover.
Mm-hmm. And before we get into talking about required student and course components for the syllabus, I want to take just a minute or two and talk about a few more kind of tips, tricks, best practices as you're sitting down and thinking about making your syllabus for the upcoming semester. Is anyone already done with a syllabus for the fall semester? Okay, good. Or else I guess you wouldn't be here. So I guess the first thing I would say when you're thinking about sitting down to put together a syllabus for the first time, think about who your audience is. It may seem very simple and it may seem very basic and you may feel like it's spelled out for you, but think about drilling down a little bit deeper and trying to learn more about these students, because that will help you as an instructor kind of formulate what you're doing in terms of creating that syllabus, and it will also help kind of guide you for different topics to cover. Through my Ole Miss, of course, I'm sure most of you know, you can go in and actually print out a class roll. Great thing to do before the first day of class, because it will include pictures of your students as well. Maybe a few days before, go ahead and do it just to start familiarizing yourself with some of those faces, some of those names. But if you actually go into SAP, if you have SAP access, you can find out a little bit more information about those students, such as their hometown. And so that can be very helpful for many different reasons. You may have a course that is consisting mostly of non-resident students, or you may have a course that's very heavy with Mississippi residents. And so again, that may kind of guide some of the things you're doing as you're putting together that sequencing and different topics to cover. If you have a course that has many Mississippi students in it, maybe you don't spend as much time on, say, the Ole Miss Traditions chapter or things that these students may be more familiar with. So the more you can learn about the students prior to that first day of class, the more it's going to help you when you're building that syllabus. Again, it may seem very basic, but there's a lot of differences sometimes between teaching a 105 section and a 305 section, so spend some time with that. If you are teaching a 305 section, think about that. What are the students who are coming in as new transfers to the university trying to get out of this course? What are you as an instructor trying to give to these students? What are the learning outcomes, the learning objectives? A lot of times a transfer student can be very different than an incoming freshman. We see that they come to us with as many as 64 hours of college coursework, and if you are teaching EDHE 305, you need to be prepared that you may have some second semester freshmen in there and you may have some first semester juniors in there. So it's a wide gamut of students. And again, the more you can kind of drill down and figure out who those students are, what they're looking to get out of the course, the more it's going to help you as you're putting together that syllabus. Speaking just a little bit more about transfer students, I'm speaking from experience as an EDHE 305 instructor. A lot of times these students are looking to get something entirely different out of the course than incoming freshmen are. Again, a lot of them are coming to us more advanced in their academic career, so they're closer to graduation. They're more focused on maybe career preparedness, resume development, cover letters, different components that are going to get them ready to go into the working world in the next 2 years, 2.5 years, whatever it may be. So really think about that as well. Transfer students, of course, want to acclimate, assimilate to the local campus community as well as the local Oxford community. A lot of them are coming from community and junior colleges all over the state. They may have never even been to Oxford or Ole Miss before deciding to come here. So think about ways that you can build in different events, activities, components to your syllabus that'll help these students really engage. And that goes for 105 as well. A lot of students are coming here having never been to Oxford or maybe spent very little time here. So the more that you can do to kind of introduce them to those different communities, both on campus and in Oxford, will help very much. One more quick tip on transfer students. I've heard some instructors say, maybe teaching writing is not as important for transfer students. What I found in my experience is it's every bit as important to spend time on that chapter with transfers as it is with incoming freshmen. They may be coming to us again from a community or junior college that structures writing very differently. Certainly from the experiences I've had asking my transfer students to write essays, there's different expectations at a university as opposed to a community or junior college in a lot of cases. So think about really spending some time on that chapter, trying to understand where all of your students are, both 105 and 305, in terms of their writing abilities and what they can do to improve. The next kind of tip, trick, best practice would be to use your resources. The model syllabus is a tremendous resource that Dewey, Patrick, some folks in the in CSS, FYE have put together. Spend some time with that syllabus. Of course, it's very basic. It's going to have the bare minimum, but it's a great starting spot. As Ann said, there's going to be some core components in there that must be included in all syllabi, and so it's important to first start there and then expand out and see where you want to go, how you want to personalize it, kind of make it your own from that model syllabus. Use other instructors as well. I found this to be one of the most helpful tips when I was a new instructor for EDHE. If I had folks in my office who I knew had taught previously, I said, hey, can I see your syllabus? Would you mind sending it to me just to see what you've done in the past? If you have other friends, coworkers, colleagues on campus, ask them if you can sit down for 30 minutes with them and just go through, what worked for you, what didn't work, how did you get to the point where you are now? And you'll be surprised how readily available that information is, how willing folks are to share it. And then certainly, I don't want to speak for Ann, but I think we're both very willing to share our syllabi with you when we complete those here in about a week or so. So reach out to us, reach out to other folks that you know, ask to see many different copies of syllabi because you'll get all kinds of different ideas from different folks. All right, so let's jump into talking about minimum requirements for EDHE 105 and 305 students. So Ann mentioned the learning objectives earlier, and then also with that, the core curriculum. And so the core curriculum is something that's expected to be present in every syllabus, like Ann said, and it's also expected that instructors will teach to the core curriculum. And actually, let me back up for one moment. Before we jump into core curriculum specifically, let me talk about the minimum requirements for 105 and 305 students in terms of how the course is structured. So there are about 8 or 10 minimum requirements for all EDHE 105 and 305 students. And again, I know that Dewey, Patrick, and some other folks have spent a lot of time really determining that these are the most effective ways to teach the course, the most effective things to include in a syllabus. So Ann talked about class attendance already. Again, it's up to the instructor to set that policy. Consider being flexible would be my best, I guess, piece of advice. When I'm teaching a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class, I normally allow for 3 absences and 2 if I'm teaching a Tuesday, Thursday. And what I tell students is there's no such thing as an excused or an unexcused absence in my course. You either get 3 absences or 2 absences for the whole semester to use however you choose. I don't need to see a doctor's note. You don't need to tell me ahead of time. Those are your absences to use as you see fit. Now, what I also tell them is that if they miss a class beyond those 3 that are allowed or beyond those 2 that are allowed, at my discretion, I can lower their final grade in the course by 1 full letter grade. Make sure to emphasize that early and often with them, because inevitably situations are going to arise where they're going to use their absences early in the semester and they're going to come to you with every story that you can imagine under the sun. That's why I say be flexible. Again, at your discretion, I try and work with students as much as possible to avoid lowering the letter grade if they're missing class, but if there's a pattern that develops, it becomes a problem. Sometimes you have to have that difficult conversation with them, but consider being as flexible as possible, but communicating those expectations up front. Yes, ma'am.
I had, through the years, I've had students who have missed a lot of class, and I've taught for probably 10 years in a row at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I remember several times when certain students just could not get up. I had one young man who had 4 alarm clocks, and he just couldn't. So we discussed it in class, because he really felt bad about missing class. And I talk a lot about respect for others, and that your attendance and your promptness shows respect for everyone in the class. So he asked the class members to help him. And so he was on everybody's phone. And so from 5 to 8, if we hadn't seen Dylan, they would call him, And it was kind of neat to see that in the class, that they cared about their classmate getting there and getting credit. And he really appreciated the help. And if you've got 18 people calling you, he got up. He came in his pajamas a lot. So sometimes students just need that extra help, and that was kind of a neat thing to see in the class.
Yeah, peer accountability.
Yeah.
That's great. Another minimum requirement for all sections is exams. This goes back to accreditation. Again, the university asks that you give examinations in some form or fashion, but there is a lot of leeway there for the individual instructor to decide how you're going to give these assessments. Are they going to be all multiple choice, true, false? Are there going to be some essay exams? How many exams are you going to give? Again, this is where it helps to really see a few different copies of different people's syllabi and what they've done in the past, how they've structured it. I know instructors who give as many as 4 or 5 graded exams per semester. I know just as many who only give a midterm and a final. And so again, it's kind of about finding that balance, what works for you. But you do have some leeway there.
And I feel like when you're coming up with those exams and the formatting and everything, think about it really in terms of these learning objectives. And is this connecting to that? And are you figuring that out and assessing that, because that's really what it all is about, and not necessarily just how can I come up with an exam that's tough or easy, but really connecting it to those learning objectives.
And it'll make it easier to create exams if you're tying into those learning objectives. Be strategic about scheduling your exams when you're going to do that in the semester. Of course, most people will give a midterm during that week of midterms on campus. If you're going to do that, make sure you allow enough time for yourself to grade those exams and to enter midterm grades for students. Again, from my personal experience, they appreciate very much seeing those midterm grades, whether they're good or bad, just knowing where they stand. If you're going to give a midterm, anytime during that week, make sure that you have enough time to grade those and to get some grades recorded for the students. I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this on the record, but consider giving your final a week early. I found it. No? Okay, sorry.
Very specific requirement.
Do not consider giving your final a week early.
And when we submit for accreditation, they bill 3 hours of contact in the exam. Now, the student may not be in there 3 hours. The registrar, Dr. Fant Pegues, is very emphatic. We have to give an exam in that time assigned by the registrar's office based on your class meeting time.
Okay, so strike that from the record.
We'll edit that out.
School of Education is rampantly guilty of giving exams on the last day of class, particularly in the graduate programs. That is not supposed to happen.
You must adhere to the time that is designated by the registrar's office for giving your exam, so there's a best practice. All right, moving on. Reflective response papers, also a minimum requirement for both sections of EDHE. Students are required to write reflection response papers for 5 campus events. Fall convocation, Rebel Run, a Creed Week event, a cultural event, and a volunteer event are those 5 campus events that they'll write their response papers on.
And I have to interject something here, because when the curriculum committee, advisory committee, formed the minimum events, a couple of things hadn't taken place. One big one is Rebel Run. Athletics is going to limit the participation in Rebel Run this year to 1,700 students. First 1,700 that sign up. I'm going to send you some information from Bradley Baker to disseminate to your students, and we suggest before they get here, because they can sign up. I don't remember the date exactly, but they can sign up before they arrive on campus. So we can't mandate. You're gonna have to have a Rebel Run or another event, because we'll have about 3,300. It looks like maybe 3,400 enrolled in EDHE 105 and about 300 in 305. So you do the math, that's 3,700 students and only 1,700 can do Rebel Run.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to have to, and at the faculty meeting on August 6th, we'll have some alternatives. And while I'm talking here, just Creed Week is not going to be Creed Week.
Mm-hmm.
The current administration of the ASB, Creed Week was created by the ASB, is now going to have a week of events which will include emphasis on the Creed, which will be called ASB Week. It's the week of August 31st. And again, Ross Bork is going to do that talk he does, which is very effective, on living the Creed. And he's going to do it in the Ford Center. The Ford Center seats 1,200. We can't have 3,700 EDHE students trying to get in the Ford Center. So I'm working with the ASB folks to make sure we've got plenty of events and activities that focus during that time on Creed Week.
Mm-hmm.
There will be no quote-unquote Creed Week. There will be an ASB Week that will have Creed emphasis.
Okay. So 2 important changes to the reflective response papers. Rebel Run or another event, and Creed Week will now be ASB Week. Have fun with the cultural events, with the volunteer events. Try and find ways to engage the students in the local community, the campus community, in new and interesting ways. I've had a lot of fun with my classes over the semesters with these cultural events and volunteer events, and really getting them out and having them be active in the local communities. 2 things that have worked really well for me for cultural events are brown bag lectures at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture. I give them at the beginning of the semester the schedule of all those brown bag lectures throughout the year, and I say you can pick one to attend, write your reflection response on that. A lot of times students will pick a lecture about the blues or something like that, and they come back and tell me how much they enjoyed it and how they never would have gone or experienced that type of event without it being required. So find ways that you can make it fun, interesting, unique for them. I've had a lot of success with Thacker Mountain Radio as well in the past. Once or twice a semester, Thacker Mountain will move from Off Square Books to the Lyric, which is a little bit bigger venue, and I always take my class on that Thursday to Thacker Mountain Radio. They will complain a lot, and they'll say, this isn't when our class time meets, you're making me come after hours and everything. I get that. I still make it a required event where I meet them halfway, as I say, we won't meet in class the day after we've gone to Thacker Mountain Radio. You can use that time to write your reflection response paper, spend some time with it. And again, they will gripe a little bit about having to go to an event outside of normal class hours, but the vast majority of my students over the semesters have always really enjoyed that event. And some of you have come and seen me later in the semester and said, I kept going to Thacker Mountain Radio on Thursdays because I enjoyed it so much. Same thing with volunteer events, volunteeroxford.org. I checked it actually yesterday, and there's a temporary broken link on there. I'm assuming they're going to have that back up soon, but that's a great resource for the students if you have them pick out their own volunteer event. A few that I've had great success with in the past is we'll usually pick one Tuesday during the semester where the entire class will go to more than a meal together, and we'll work serving food, interacting with folks in the local community. And again, that's been a very powerful experience for a lot of those students. I've also worked with the Oxford City Market before. They're new, they're growing, they're expanding. They always need lots of help. They appreciate volunteers. The students have a great time getting to interact with the various vendors there. So again, just try and think outside the box. Find ways that you can connect the students to different aspects of Oxford or the university community.
The last several years, my students have helped clean up the Grove after a game.
Yes.
And they've worked with, you can call Jeff McManus to schedule that. I always try to, predict a game that's not going to have an 8 p.m. kickoff so that I'm not out here at 2 in the morning with them. But the students gripe a lot about it, but afterwards afterwards say, thank you for making us do that. I had no idea what kind of trash people leave, and they had a completely different perspective, not only about the Grove, but also about the people that are responsible for keeping their campus clean. So it kind of tied sustainability and service together.
Absolutely.
For my social class, I always do like an extra credit volunteer assignment. I do a lot of STEM education, and so the CMSE is always putting on K through 12, math and science curriculum events that are really cool. If you're not in STEM, I get excited because I don't do science and math, and so it's kind of my way to be a nerd for a day, I guess. And they're always looking for student volunteers to help out because it's usually just those that are involved within the actual competition or something. So that's one way that I use it for extra credit, but they're always doing stuff. So that's something if they want to do, just go over to the Jackson Avenue Center. They don't want to go far. They don't have a car. They can't travel around Oxford. They can just walk across the street. And I always find the students that do actually go really enjoy it because it's a fun event. So that's another option.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any unique ideas, events that you've used before with success?
Well, the Center for Inclusion hosts several events throughout the semester. So we will have a calendar that I could share with you this year with everybody. But we have lots of things planned, all the Heritage Month celebrations that we plan in terms of cultural events that students can take part of. And then we also can come in and help facilitate conversations and
Great.
And related to game day, the students can volunteer for Green Grove, which is the game day recycling education and outreach program that's our office runs. And it's especially freshman students love to be involved with it because it gives them a very comfortable way to be in the Grove for a football game, and they have a purpose. And so they get to go out and they just talk to fans and visitors about how to recycle and what to recycle. And they can take it a little bit farther by volunteering to sort the recycling, which we do every Monday and Tuesday after a football game. So it's a complete experience we could offer for game day behind the scenes.
All right, next is the personal journal submissions. Pretty straightforward. 5 submissions throughout the course of the semester are required. Again, up to the instructor to determine whether you're going to give the students prompts or whether you're going to allow these to be just free responses. If you don't give prompts, expect to get all types of different responses, but sometimes those are the best journals that I've received, is when they're just allowed to kind of free write and express what's going on in their lives, what's happening at that particular time. So again, up to the individual instructor. A common reading component is also part of the minimum requirements. Group projects, attend related campus events, etc., related to the common reading. More information about integrating the common reading into your course is going to be shared at the July 31st workshop, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail there, but we will have some more information available toward the end of the month. Faculty member visits are also a required component. Just a tip that I use, without having to put too much onus on the faculty member to let me know that students came and to see them, I ask the students to just shoot me an email when they meet with a faculty member of their choice, say, who'd you meet with, what time did you meet with them. I'll usually spot check a few of those over the course of the semester, either pick up the phone and call that particular faculty member, shoot them an email, just say, hey, checking in to make sure that Mary came at the time she said she did. If I don't see any problems, I don't check every single one of those, but again, up to the individual instructor.
So that's expected that they just go visit one faculty, like just one faculty member?
During their office hours, yeah, that's what we ask of them.
I tie mine to an assignment and I have them go meet all of them. They have to print off their schedule. The instructor or faculty member has to sign it and they have to write a summary response. So I know that they physically have met with every single one of their instructors except for me.
Yes.
I do that separately.
Yes.
And that goes back to the, this learning objective of practicing building healthy relationships with peers, professors, and university staff, because a lot of them, without that requirement, will just kind of hide behind, be a little bit anonymous, and it can be intimidating. I mean, I've never given them very specific instructions like that, and I think I might move a little bit more towards that because they just don't even know what to do, you know. And even when the visits with me, some of them come with all these questions to ask, like they're interviewing me, you know, and it's really sweet, but I think it just goes to show you that they're very uncomfortable, a lot of them approaching.
We really need to have some pre-visit information and instruction on what to do, because some of our faculty don't like the fact that we ask our EDHE 105 and 305s to make these visits. Others think it's the greatest idea in the world and applaud that going on. But when they show up and say, professor says, how do you do, what can I do for you? He says, well, I'm just here, I had to do this for EDHE 105. That doesn't really go over very well.
Yeah.
But it's very important. But again, we're unleashing, with about 3,700 students, we're unleashing 7,400 in one semester potential office visits.
Be very intentional about how you go about assigning that part of the syllabus. EDHE 105 and 305 instructor visits are also part of the minimum requirements. 2 are highly recommended. I will talk a little bit more here in a few minutes when we get to sequencing, how I tend to structure those. And then the last component of those minimum requirements is class participation. Again, very subjective, can be determined by you, the instructor, how you're going to award those class participation points, what all goes into it. Any questions on minimum requirements?
Is there a set minimum point value that we have to have for for our grading system, or is that determined on us?
As far as I know, that's up to the individual instructor, correct?
Different people have different points systems. I use a 750 point system. Others use a 500. That is strictly up to the instructor, because different people are going to emphasize different parts of the course. That's where the course is more art than science.
There are 2 required presentations per semester for EDHE 105 and 305, and the folks in the Center for Student Success and First Year Experience will communicate with you individually about when your section comes up. But you will be assigned dates for an active shooter presentation that UPD will lead, and also a J.D. Williams library orientation tour. So keep in mind that those dates, when you're making your syllabus and doing your sequencing, you will have dates given to you when those presentations will come up for your section.
We should have those dates to you, if not next week, then early the following week. I've just held off on getting this course schedule to folks at the library and at UPD, because we're actually having to add some sections right now. And once I get those added, I want to send them a complete list so they can do the schedule. But we'll get that to you within the next 10 days.
Will those be assigned during one of our regular class meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
We go there and they come.
You will go there for both. Yeah.
You go up to Kennard, into their training room 202, and then to 106 D or E in the library down on the very first floor for your orientation session. But it'll be within normal class time.
The next section on the handout that you have is unique course components and best practices to consider. I won't go over every single one of these individually, just hit on a few high points. If there is something you're interested in hearing more about, please ask us at the end during questions. Come up and see us afterwards. We're happy to discuss any individually. But a few that I do want to highlight that I use prominently in my class. First, the MBTI completion. Again, the folks in Center for Student Success and First Year Experience will be emailing a link to you for your students to take the Myers-Briggs type type indicator, sorry. And this is generally very early in the semester when we get these links, so they can take that assessment. And then I actually use their Myers-Briggs personality types for a lot of things that I do within the course. If I have group projects, presentations, things where they're working with more than one student. I try and pair them with students that are very different from themselves based on their MBTI, and introduce them to working with folks that, you know, may be very extroverted when they're very introverted. And the way I kind of couch that is when they get into the real world, they're not going to be able to pick and choose who their group members are. And so it's important to start learning now how to work with all different types of people. So I use the MBTI very heavily in my sections. If you're not comfortable necessarily teaching the chapter on MBTI, there is a great recording that I believe, Dewey, do you have a physical copy of it, or is it on Blackboard?
We have copies of it.
Okay.
You've got it on Blackboard too, no?
It's not out there yet.
Okay. It's Mark Showalter who does the most incredible job with that. It's chapter 4 in the book.
Yes.
I assume it's still chapter 4.
It is.
It's early on.
Yes.
And we'll get that. Actually, Mariana does all that. Thank her for doing that.
And if you do plan to use that, that video to teach MBTI, make sure to watch it yourself before going into it. It is a little bit lengthy, so you may be able to kind of pick and choose what portions of it you're going to show, or if you're going to use 2 full class periods to do it, try and fit it into one, but just be sure to watch it before if you intend to use it. The Student Services group scavenger hunt is another component that I found very helpful for my students, and they really enjoy it too. I try and work this into the first week or 2 of class just to get them out and about and visiting different student services components. The way that I've done it in the past is I have them take selfies, try and be current with it. But I ask them to first identify the 10 locations, and then they have to actually go to those locations and take a selfie, and I have to in some way understand that they're at the right location. I usually tell them to do it in front of a sign or an office or something like that that I can see, and then I have them email them to me. If you give out your cell phone number in class, you can have them text them to you as well, but always have them take selfies to prove they were there. They have some fun with it too. I get some goofy faces sometimes. Also, the in-class viewing of the Chucky Mullins DVD, very, very powerful. Dewey has information on how to access this. There is a link we have as well as a password. It is a bit of a lengthy video. It's about I think it's an hour and 20 minutes or so, and so it's tough to try and fit it into one class period if you're Monday, Wednesday, Friday. When I have taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the past, I've broken it up into 2, and we'll usually intro the Chucky Mullins video for about 10 or 15 minutes, talk about who he was, kind of introduce them to Chucky, show the first portion of it, and we'll come back the next period, show the rest of the video, and then kind of talk about, again, Chucky Mullins in the larger context at Ole Miss. Last one I'll talk about here is the Career Exploration Project. Used to be a requirement of the course, is no longer a requirement, but is one that you know, we certainly strongly encourage you to do with your students. It's very practical for both 105 and 305 students. Lots of different options for how you can integrate the Career Exploration Project. A few things that I've done over the years, especially for my transfer students, I have them create a resume as well as a cover letter for me, and these are graded assignments for the class. And what I'll usually have them do is I will schedule a meeting with the Career Center, either to have my class go there or to have someone come present, and usually I'll do all 3, internships, cover letters, and resumes, and we'll do it all in 1 week if I'm teaching a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And so they'll go through and they'll hear all those presentations, and what I ask the students to do is then identify an actual real open position that they could apply to, whether it be an internship or a full-time position. And so they've got to send me a link to where they found that position online through jobs.com, internships.com, various resources, and then they write their cover letter personal to that open position. So it gets them in the practice of talking about their unique skill sets, how they would be a good match for that position. And then what I do is I grade the cover letter and I grade the resume, and I give it back to them, but I allow students to resubmit both assignments as many times as they'd like, making the corrections, and I'll allow them to get 100% on those assignments, because the most important thing obviously is I want them to walk out of class with a resume they're proud of, with a cover letter they feel like they can use in the real world. So those are some of the components for the Career Exploration Project. Another very neat piece of technology is we have the ability to conduct mock interviews online for our students. I think the Career Center would send a hit squad after me if I said that I was sending my entire class to come do individual mock interviews with them. But what you can actually do is through career.olemiss.edu, there's something called Interview Stream, and you can find the link to it on the left side of that page. And this is an assignment you can give to students to do outside the classroom on their own time. They can actually sit down and record a mock interview through interviewstream.com. They can either ask for random questions if they're just looking for a very basic interview, or they can actually input their own very specific questions for a specific career field or a job they're applying for. They sit there and it's a real person in a sense, but the questions are read back to them. They respond, it's recorded. They can then use that recording to be critiqued, either by someone at the Career Center. In the past, as an instructor, I've critiqued those interviews for them. It is time consuming, but it's very beneficial, a very worthwhile process for the students. Any questions right now on those unique course components, best practices? Okay, we will keep cruising down to suggested presentations and visits to schedule. Same deal, I won't go over everything, just hit a few of the high points. Ole Miss Campus Recreation is a great presentation for the students to hear. One reason why it's so wonderful is that actual current Ole Miss students come to class and give the presentation on campus recreation. Shannon Richardson at the Turner Center is your contact for scheduling those presentations, and they'll have their student workers in campus recreation come and either do a panel type discussion, I think, or they'll actually have some presentations specific to what you're looking for the students. But it's a great way to, again, get them connected with current students, let those students talk about it as well. Again, the Career Center is a great resource. They will come to you if you'd like. Again, internships, resumes, cover letter development, all 3 dedicated workshops they have. You can actually schedule your class to have a tour of the Career Center as well, which is oftentimes very helpful because a lot of students aren't thinking about the Career Center until maybe their last semester in college, and at that point, you know, and a lot of times it's really too late to be creating that resume, that LinkedIn page, that cover letter. So think about just introducing them to those resources early on in the semester. And then last, certainly a plug for the sustainability presentation. If you will contact Ann McCauley.
It's really good.
It is a great presentation. Every semester I have actually 2 sustainability presentations in my class, and the students really enjoy it. Ann and I, through Ann's office, we have the UM Green Fund, and I sit on that committee as the student affairs representative, and we solicit UM Green Fund projects from students, faculty, and staff in both fall and spring semester. They can submit ideas to us to be considered for funding, and so what I've done is I've actually structured that as a graded assignment in my courses. I break up the students, again, based on their MBTI results into small groups, and they will work throughout the whole semester to actually create and submit a UM Green Fund proposal, and we've had 2 or 3 of them funded since I started doing this, so it's fun. You know, it's a way for them to have an impact on campus, you know, legacy, leave a legacy, I guess. So very neat opportunities. Any questions on suggested presentations, visits to schedule? All right, keep cruising. Let's talk very quickly about the EDHE105 and 305 core curriculum. Again, this is going to be spelled out in that model syllabus that's available on Blackboard and that you had the opportunity to pick up today. Very important along with the learning objectives. These 5 items of the core curriculum, again, are expected to be integrated into each section that you're teaching of EDHE 105 and 305. Time management, inclusion, relationships and communication, campus resources and local knowledge, and then wellness. And so one tip or best practice that I would give for how to work your syllabus or your sequencing around the core curriculum is look at each one of those components individually. When you're sitting down to make the syllabus, take time management, write it on a piece of paper, and write everything under there what you're going to do related to time management. The chapters you're going to teach that relate to it, what events and presentations you'll associate with that particular component, who will you schedule for guest speakers related to it, and you'll see that that kind of naturally leads into sequencing. Your schedule will almost build itself around what you hope to accomplish within each of those core curriculum components. Anything on that?
That's good.
All right. Okay, in terms of sequencing, Again, I won't go, we've given you all an example of sequencing here, and I'm not going to go through every single week of the sequencing, but more just kind of talk about why it's sequenced the way it is. And sequencing is very personal, again, to each individual instructor. You need to decide what's going to work best for you. When are you going to teach specific chapters? When are you going to schedule those presentations and events? And the more you teach, some of our veteran folks can probably speak to this, the easier that becomes. Again, my sequencing changes probably 6 or 7 times throughout the semester. That's why I'm very careful to clearly state to the students that this can and likely will change, but you can have some fun with it too. Again, simply an example, but think about what would you want your own kids to know their first week on campus? What would be most important if your son, daughter, whomever is coming to school at Ole Miss? What would you want them to experience to learn that first week? The first half of the semester, the first month, the first week of the semester, all crucial points when you're thinking about sequencing. So if you look down below there, as I mentioned, we have broken it out by week. Again, just purely an example of sequencing. But a few highlights from it, that first week of school, the week of August 24th, if you'll notice in all those different bullet points there, there's no assigned reading the first week. I've found this to be a great practice, again, for the students, especially if you're teaching a 105 section. It's all going to be so new to them. They're going to be so excited and have so many different things going on that first week. I like to spend a lot of time just getting to know the students, again, going over the syllabus, not really jumping into a lot of the chapters or a lot of the assignments right away until you're comfortable with the students and they become more comfortable with you. A few things that are important usually to discuss that first week is what is EDHE105 or 305. A lot of times students sign up for this course either because they're part of a group, you know, a FIG, an LLC, whatever it may be that requires it. Sometimes they're told at orientation, you know, you need to sign up, different things like that. But a lot of times they want to know more about why. Why are we taking this course? What is it about this course that's going to help me as a student at Ole Miss? So really spend some time trying to break that down with them. Have open, honest dialogues with them. Ask them what questions they have, what they want to get out of the course.
And one of the things that someone said at another workshop I went to was that if you don't spell out for students why they're doing it, then they might just make up their own reasons, and busy work is something that comes up a lot, especially with the writing, when it actually is really meaningful and there's a lot of reasons that we do it. So I think that can be true of a lot of the different components.
Absolutely. If you are going to hold 2 individual instructor meetings between you and the students throughout the semester, think about having that first one the first 2 weeks of school. It'll help you tremendously to get to know the students. It'll also help them to kind of break down that barrier of being very intimidated by the instructor. If you get in a setting where it's just you and the student one-on-one for 10 or 15 minutes those first 2 weeks, you'll be surprised how much they'll begin to open up to you, what they'll volunteer in those meetings. It'll really help you, again, to kind of figure out how to best address the class for that student. The second week, the week before the first home football game, that's kind of when we get into the textbook in terms of this sequencing. Again, just be smart about where the weeks fall in the semester. That second week is the first week leading up to our first home football game. So it may be a good time to talk about the chapters on drug and alcohol use, violence prevention and campus safety, maybe emphasize the 2-strike rule, Grove behavior for that first Grove game day experience. And then also a great opportunity to discuss game day traditions at Ole Miss and what to expect. A lot of these students are going to come here having no idea that many of them do dress up for football games, and so you can talk about some of those traditions that we've had in the past and just basically what to expect at your first home football game. Just a few more quick highlights and we'll open it up to questions. The week of September 14th, if you'll see in the sequencing there, we have it spelled out for active listening, note-making, and reading chapters, as well as test-taking strategies, stress management, the library, writing program, academic honesty, plagiarism quiz. That sounds like a lot for a week, but a lot of those chapters are shorter, and it's important to cover some of these components very early on, certainly well in advance of midterms, because again, if you're teaching a 105 section, these students are coming in having no experience with college exams, and so the more you can help them in terms of what to expect, you know, how they need to be taking their notes, what's going to be on an upcoming test, not just for your class but for others as well, I think you'll find that they feel it's very beneficial early in the semester. And then as you get into midterm week, this is generally the time I like to start thinking about that second meeting with my students individually. Usually those 2 or 3 weeks immediately following the midterm is a good time to do it, because at that point, theoretically, you've had some graded assignments. They've turned in some things. They've taken at least one exam, hopefully, at that point. And so you've got a clear picture of how their grade is shaping up. And so they'll appreciate that opportunity to come in and talk to you about what's going on, where they can improve. Also a good idea if you have any that are maybe falling behind to really address some of those issues that you're having very shortly thereafter midterm, so it doesn't continue much beyond. And then just kind of to wrap things up, a lot of instructors will save guest speakers or individual and group presentations for the end of the semester. I do that. It can be a little overwhelming. I'll probably change that this year, because what's happened in the past is I usually run into at least 1 full week, if not 2 full weeks of presentations, and that can get pretty repetitive for both me and the students. So again, we've got it sequenced this way as an example, but feel free to go in and kind of play around with these different weeks, figure out what works best for you, and please remember to schedule your final exam on the day that it is given to you. All right.
Do you may have any questions, or looking back on some of the goals or issues that you wanted to have kind of covered? Yes.
Just to touch on what you just said, Ty, about the guest monotony in a sense of them listening to the presentations. I also found that if you did, like the last week or the week before or whatnot, close to the end of just presentations, your participation in class seems to dwindle. If students don't use up their absences, they'll typically say, oh, well, today's a presentation day, I don't have to show up. And my classes talk about the respect, too, of the other students when giving presentations. But I kind of, after a few years, moved that to where it's just kind of staggered throughout the semester if your presentation is coming up type of thing, just because I noticed participation and attendance just dwindled if you waited until the end of the semester.
Yep. That's a great best practice, Rachel. One thing that I've done as well, because I've noticed that same problem, especially when I schedule it toward the end of the semester, I usually have my students, as their group presentation, present a chapter in the textbook. And what I'll do is I'll use a lot of that information on the final exam, and I communicate that to them when we're talking about the group presentation. So not only do they have to use the chapter as a resource, but they have to pull in one outside resource as well for that presentation. And I'll tell the students that I'm going to pull at least one question from the information that was communicated from the chapter, as well as that outside resource. So if they're missing that day, it's going to be tough for them to make up that information for the final exam.
You can put, I put it in the rubric as well. It's like, I think it's 80 points for my career presentation and 10 points is respect and participation in others' presentations.
Yep, great way to do it. What other questions do you all have?
I'm interested in how people, what the approach is to participation points. How do you award them, not award them? Do you put a lot of emphasis on that because class participation is so important to the intentions of the course? So do you, are class participation points heavy? I mean, are they a large part of the overall grade? And how are they awarded or not awarded?
You want to speak to that, Ann?
I've struggled with that as well.
It's tough.
It's really tough. Because I've also found it's hard to give feedback in a real timely manner to that aspect. It kind of changes, from week to week and class to class on how people show up. So I haven't really found a really good way to handle that part for the participation.
One thing I do is I build the plagiarism quiz into my participation points. I'll usually, my class is graded out of 1,000 points, and I'll make class participation usually 50 points of that, and 10 of those points will be completing the plagiarism quiz. They don't necessarily have to get 100%, but I tell them they have to at least get one question right. They'll get those full 10 points. So you can be creative with it. I build attendance into my participation. I say there's no, you don't get 1.5 points per every class you come to in participation. But I say if you're missing a lot of classes, you know, beyond the prospect of having your grade lowered to full letter grade, I'll take that into consideration when I'm doing class participation as well. Does anyone else have best practices they use for grading participation?
I, like a couple weeks before midterm, I'll usually create like a survey just to ask them, you know, how do you think you're doing in this class? What can I do to help you the second half of the semester? Like, what specifically do you want to know more about? And one of the, you know, I just ask them different questions like that. And one of the questions I ask them is how, you know, how do you think your class participation is going? What could be keeping you from participating more in class? And then when I meet with them for the second instructor visit, I'll read over their responses and I'll kind of talk to them about that, like how do you think you're doing in class? And then they kind of like, they're usually pretty candid. You know, they'll usually be honest and say like, well, I haven't been participating that much. I'm really shy and I'm gonna try to work harder on that. Or they kind of know, like, if they're participating. I think talking about it like openly helps.
Yeah, I do use that instructor visit time to really nail it down with some of them. Like, I think some of them have a little bit, sometimes I have over participators, you know, who don't really participate in classroom dialogue, but their own dialogue. And so I try to use that as the time to say, this is part of your grade too. Don't forget this part. It's not just showing up, it's how you show up.
I usually, when I taught 101 academic probation class, you get students in there who, most of them don't want to be there. And so just getting them to class was a whole new struggle. And I usually find, at least with my smaller classes, that it's much easier to have the dialogue, but some students will just show up and just sit there, and they'll fiddle on their phone. And I'm really, really, really big on, I don't care if they have laptops or iPads, whatever, if that's how they take notes. I can't stand cell phones in class. And I tell them that that is part of the participation just because you show up. You're going to show up and not speak up in class, because some students just don't feel comfortable at 18 years old talking in front of people. I didn't. I hated it. I liked the massive lecture classes, so I try not to force it on them. And so I just kind of remind that if they are going to be here, that they need to be respectful, that you need to make sure that you're respecting your other classmates who are willing to speak up and have a conversation. And usually within a few weeks, they kind of get the message and they start to open up and become more comfortable talking to people. In my big classes, it's kind of one of those, I'm not super strict on attendance, but I say that if you are going to miss more than 5 class periods, because at the end of the day, they're paying for class, it's their grade, I don't care, then when they're in class, they need to be respectful. And I do a weight, like, okay, is their attendance 100%? Then that kind of will compensate the participation. If I find that some students just are not speaking up, I'll bring like a bag of like mini candies, and I'll just start calling people out, and you get rewarded, you get a piece of candy. And that'll open the dialogue for those who don't like to speak up. And I'll purposely call on students who are quiet, because you do have the over participators, the overachievers, where they shadow everybody that likes to stay quiet. So I'll make sure that they take a day off, so we need everybody else to speak. And that starts to kind of shift everything, and then by the end of the semester, even after midterms, everybody's talking cell phones away, and you're good. So it's a practice.
Thank you. Yes, Rachel.
I have a question for you guys, and I guess anybody else who's taught before. On attendance, I've struggled with different things and trying attendance as far as the 2 or 3, and then I'm going to change your grade versus every day you get so many participation points, and if you're not here, you get 0, and that can drastically affect your grade. My biggest problem last year was the fact that you had so many that you could miss, but of course, they'd miss them all in the beginning, and then they would be really sick with fever and show up for class and say, well, I can't miss anymore. And I know that's when, I could say, all right, well, then we can discuss this later, but that's also you used all of them, and now I understand you're trying to be here. How do you guys, or how have you possibly dealt with that in the past?
I'm thinking of putting something in my syllabus that says if you have fever, you're not allowed in.
Yes.
But that, I mean, that was the first time I'd ever run into that. So many people got sick last semester for me.
I don't allow any unexcused absences. If they don't let me know ahead of time, I'm not really big on what the excuse is, because I was one of those students that did struggle my first years of college going to class. And I'm just huge, if they send me an email before class starts and explain to me why they will not be there, then I'm okay. I do remind them that, okay, like I take it into consideration if you're legitimately sick, because I know if a bug is going around, we all know that if campus is just, there's a plague, versus the student who kind of has the same excuse every 2 weeks, they're constantly, oh, I don't feel good, oh, I have a migraine. I do keep that in the back of my mind and make a note, you know, make sure this is, watch out for the student, for the overused excuses. But I usually, mine is like 5 absences is my cutoff. Anything more than 5 is where I start to take the points off, and that's with excuse. Unexcused, I do a point system. If you have 5 unexcused absences for a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I think it's like 2.5 points is how I weigh it out. And that seems to work for me because I do get like 3 absences for most of my students and like 15. And there is a huge separation, and it makes it easy for me to be like, okay, like, yeah, they're gonna get a C in their absences and maybe an F in participation, and then these students will get 95. I rarely give 100% because nobody's there every single day and participating 100%. That's just what works for me. It's different. It was very different when I did the 101 class. But that was probation students. So that is like no unexcused, no like whatever, unless there's a plague going around that I don't want you in my classroom because we're in that close proximity and I don't want to get sick. So I don't know how I'm going to do it for 105. Everybody else has suggestions for 105 because it's a different. I don't know.
When I first started teaching in EDHE105, I did do the 2 points per day. It was awful, because I had to go back in every single day and go, okay, you were here, you were not here, you were here, you were not here. I did that for 2 semesters, and our accreditation team came in and said, why are you giving them points when they're paying to be here? They need to be in the classroom. That's one less thing that you need to deal with. You need to be worried about teaching and making sure they understand the material than giving them class participation points. So now for EDHE, for the 105 class, I don't give them we don't do, here's 100 participation points. That's all included in the presentation. If you don't come to the presentations, you get 5 points taken off your presentation every day you're not there. So if you miss 2 days, it's out of 50 points, you're already down to a 40 no matter what you make. I don't give them attendance points, but I do I think I took it from Mariana's syllabus. You got 2 days, after that, we need to have a chit chat. So, and after those 2 days, I don't really have unless it's somebody who seems to be a chronic sick person all the time with that excuse. So no, I don't do, it's more work for me to have to do all the points. And how do I put that into the syllabus, and then do I spend my weekends updating Blackboard, or do I spend at home updating Blackboard because I can't get it done during the day because of everything else? So I just don't do it anymore. You have this, you go by this, it's in the syllabus. If you don't like it, there's 129 other sections you can so, which you don't have that, but yeah.
I do want to be sensitive to time. I know we're getting right against it. Is there maybe one more question? All right.
Well, thanks for coming.
Thank y'all very much.